show them favor, even as I defend and show favor to those that were ever loyal to me. This my written oath I entrust to this holy church. Castilians, God has called upon me to become your king. I now call upon you to kneel in sign of fealty. Rodrigo of Bivar, called the Cid. Why do you alone refuse me fealty?
Sire, all those you see here, though none dare say so, harbor the suspicion that you may have counseled your own brother's death. Unless you can prove your innocence, you will have no loyal subjects. Your kingdom will be torn by doubt. Thus, I cannot give you fealty, nor own you in my leave.
What will satisfy you of my innocence?
Your oath upon the holy books.
You would ask me to swear?
Sire, I do ask it.
Very well.
Will you swear that you had no part in the ordering of King Sancho's death?
I so swear.
Do you swear that you had no part by way of counsel in King Sancho's death?
I so swear.
Do you swear that you had no part by way of design in King Sancho's death?
I swear.
If you are forsworn, may you die such a death as your brother did, struck from behind by the hand of a traitor. Say amen.
President of fire, Rodrigo.
Say amen.
Amen.
So, the whole thing is a fraud. They're swearing on the Christian Bible that they will do the honest and decent thing for their country. They will do the honest and decent thing with their wives, yeah, and they will be obedient to the one true God. The whole thing is a massive stitch up, and I promised to show you the evidence for the Christianity fraud earlier today, and that is on this web page. I'm going to take you right through it from start to end, and a lot of it I still do not understand, because I, like the character portrayed as El Cid, am a simple man and an honest man, and it's ever so complex. It is really, really complex, like the Bletchley codes that were alleged to have won us World War II. The only winners in World War II were the profiteers, and the only winners in 2,000 years of religion are the profiteers. And that brings together the elites in an inner circle that I intend to expose in the next couple of videos. Okay, the sun's out, the wind is gusting, because they know that the whole of world history is a fraud. Okay, so this is the New Testament, the true authorship of, and I showed you how to find the website on my web page this morning, as I signed off on the last video we made on the popes and their role in peacetime and wartime and the brutalization of the whole world. So go to Faking the New Testament on my website. Yeah, the index is down the left here. So go to the F words, yeah, and you will find Faking the New Testament. Scan down to about a third of the way down the front page, and there you will find the URL for this true authorship PDF. It's written by a chap called Abelard Reuchlin, and he's got the copyright on that since 1979. I believe he will now be dead, because his business headquarters, where these PDFs were sold from, has now been taken over by T-Mobile, and that is the T-Mobile. T is the Christian cross in this series of shocking jokes. Okay, so that's how to find it. Let's go to it now and tell you all of the truths that Abelard Reuchlin has revealed. And that's the front page. So this man, Arius Calpurnius Piso, his pen name or his pseudonym or his author's name or his elite writer's name is Flavius Josephus. Okay, and there are dozens of other elite writers that follow on from them, that perpetrate the story, keep telling the lies, and eventually Christianity becomes the most powerful religion on the globe. Okay, and there are millions of deaths in the period in between, and it's ever so clever. Okay, so he's a Roman. He lives in Naples, yeah, and I've explained to you in the earlier videos that that is, if you twist the letters around in Naples, you get Nepal, and they think it's ever so funny that we've got false news coming out of Nepal in the last fortnight. All of it is to shield these massive religious crimes. Every one of the messianic religions are frauds, yeah, and even the Monty Python's team realise that when they say that in Deuteronomy that only the one true God should be worshipped and all messianic propositions are frauds in religion. That's actually in the Bible that these fraudsters wrote, but the coding is really complex, and I'm going to take you straight into the story and reel it off. If Abelard Reuchlin tries to convict me, I will take this video down, but I would be delighted if Abelard Reuchlin were still alive, because he's the most courageous religious researcher that the world has ever known, and he knew that it was imprudent to make videos showing what he looked like, because that could make him safer. I don't believe in that. I want everybody to know who's making this video, and it's me. Okay, so it's me, this guy, the fat guy, yeah, with the red drinker's nose, yeah, it's me that is making this video, and if I get taken down, there are thousands of potential culprits behind it, but only the global elites will really feel the pinch. Yeah, so this is George Lees in his own living room revealing the massive 2,000-year-old religious fraud. Okay, the inner circle or inner ring is the most exclusive club in history. It has consisted of those religious, political and literary leaders having knowledge of the great secret that the Calpurnius Piso family of ancient Rome created the fictional Jesus. Okay? The New Testament, the Church and Christianity. In welcoming the general public to this knowledge, the following introduction is appropriate. Originally this explanation was designed solely for Jews for the purpose of preventing their conversion to Christianity. It was not intended for Christians nor other non-Jews. No exclusivism was intended, rather concern for the faith of others. So Abelard Reuchlin and his friend Douglas Vogt, who's the publisher of this, are openly declaring that they are Jewish, and they understand the psychology of the fear in which the Jewish nation was placed when Christianity was launched, in all its pomp and with all of those armies behind it, which you saw in that little video clip from El Cid. Okay, the purpose of this booklet was to inform the Jewish Christians and Jewish Jews of the true account of the creation of Christianity in the 1st century AD. Jews were 10% of the population of the Roman Empire. Today, after 1900 years of suffering persecution, forced conversion, exiling, murder, and finally the Holocaust, the Jews are but 1/4% of the world's population. And today, don't take it too seriously, there are stats all over the place that the Jewish nations and the survivors are actually the elite Jews that were in the writing team, in the inner circle, in Rome, all of those centuries ago. Okay, so the statistics are questionable, and the Christianity and the Jewish teams are now interlocked in a massive way. Okay, and I've got the director numbers for most of that statement. Okay, and today Jews are being attacked by modern version of the age-old problems. Firstly, there are a number of groups that are called Messianic Jews or Hebrew Christians or completed Jews, whose leaders are engaged in the twofold business of 1, collecting money from Christians, their churches and their Christian organizations, and 2, using the money thus collected to evangelize the more confused or unsophisticated of their Jewish brethren into changing their religious affiliation to become Christians. Secondly, still today, other Christian, in inverted commas, groups continue to manipulate their readers and listeners by preaching hatred towards Jews. Some attack Jews by attacking the state of Israel. They claim the Holocaust was a lie created by Jews to justify Israel. They continuously present the account of the 1967 wartime attack on the USS Liberty. Go to Andrew Carrington Hitchcock's columns and you will see that exposed and the motives for it, with their cry of Jewish conspiracy. Other groups claim that they, white Christian Americans, are somehow descended from the northern 10 tribes who were carried off by Assyria in 720 BC, and that they are not Jews, are modern day Israel, and that Jews are satanic rejectors of Christ and have no right to exist. All this is done in the name of Christ while the money continues pouring in. Okay? Money and power is the motive. This hatred toward Jews seems reasonable to many only because 1900 years of stereotyping Jews has conditioned popular thinking to its acceptance. The hatred was deliberately created by the authors of the New Testament, as this booklet shows. Thirdly, our Arab cousins have seized upon the worldwide negative image of the Jews to likewise manipulate for power. They and their communist friends dominate the UN so that it spends 50% of its total time attacking Israel by every conceivable excuse. There are no communists. Some of these statements are naive. The communists always get the blame from the Christians and the Jews, it would seem. Okay? Many Christians as well as Jews have wondered at this continued manipulation of hatred. Christians have also wondered at just why the Jews did reject Jesus. They have doubted the Jesus story, but there were no answers available for their questions. Many have been clearly pleased to obtain and read this explanation. Therefore it is to seekers of truth and of all possible persuasions, and for some reason they've got that in POSS, per, in block capitals, that we respectfully submit the information in this booklet. Okay, and the word Piso is part of that anagram, but I don't really understand how they've highlighted that bit. Okay, so praise Piso. A challenging proposal. If any group or person should feel its sincerity and or honesty is being unfairly attacked by this booklet, or should wish to challenge this thesis, we stand ready to publicly debate on the issues: A, the actual authorship of the New Testament, and B, the proof that leaders know this great secret and use the information which is code in their writings. Now if you go to my website, you will see all of those proofs that all of the religious texts are written by human fraudsters, and they are egotistical enough to want that to be acknowledged, which is why they insert the code. Okay, how to obtain additional copies: send $5 per copy requested to the sole distribution. That's the Abelard Reuchlin Foundation, P.O. Box 5652, Kent, Washington 98064. Now, because these have been taken down, that is the headquarters for T-Mobile, the phone company, and I've got one somewhere in my display of my gullibility to buy into frauds like that. I cannot see it at the moment. Okay, oh, there it is. So that's a T-Mobile. That is a joke about the Christian cross. Okay, you can see at the bottom, T-Mobile. The letter T is like the cross without the sticky up bit where the head would have been drooping forward once the blood had been drained from the corpse. Okay, so that's Kent, Washington, where the North by Northwest film movie was made, where all of the planes were made in World War II by the people in the Boeing Wars, and that is right next door to where the River Runs Through It film was made, up in the mountains where the dam is. Yeah, and they've got the massive air base that was used to bomb the communists and the Germans in World War II in the same location. Abelard Reuchlin is no longer there. You can no longer contact the man, and he may well have died of old age, because he was quite old when they were making this story available to the public for that very, very low price. Okay, Reuchlin, Abelard, the true authorship of the New Testament. Bibliography: 1. Rome, Roman Empire, Roman history, Jewish history, church history, Christianity, religion, Calpurnius Piso, Flavius Joseph, ISBN 0-930808-02-9. And the contents: first, the great secret. The Jews reject the story, the authorship of the New Testament books, the numerical code systems, sounds, animals and illusions, the family in the New Testament, that's the Piso family, the creation of the church, how to find Josephus as the author, the proof that Josephus was really Calpurnius Piso, the inner circle concept, and finally chapter 11, the truth makes free. So 25 pages in the PDF. I'm just going to get straight on and take you through it. The copyrights were acknowledged in 1979, and there again is that address where T-Mobile have their massive joke and their massive business headquarters. Okay, The Great Secret, Part 1. Now this is only chunks of the stories that they tell in their published books. It's a tiny PDF with only 25 pages, so there are bits missing in between, and for that reason it will not be a continuous story to tell, because each page covers a jump to another page further on in their bigger picture. Okay, so first, the Great Secret. For there is nothing covered that will not be revealed. They knew that people like me would let the news out eventually, and they were egotistical enough to put the code in to identify themselves as the author. And that statement there, for there is nothing covered that will not be revealed, was published in Matthew 10:26. The New Testament, the Church and Christianity. I'm going to zoom in on it so we can see a little bit more with the camera at this resolution. Okay, that's better. Okay, the New Testament, the Church and Christianity were all the creation of the Calpurnius Piso, pronounced Peso. Yeah, that's the same as the currency in Latin America for centuries. Do you get it? The peso is the coinage in all of the Hispanic South American countries, yeah, who were Roman aristocrats. The New Testament and all the characters in it, Jesus, all the Josephs, all the Marys, all the disciples, apostles, Paul and John the Baptist, are all fictional rather. The Pisos created the story and the characters. They tied the story into a specific time and place in history, and they connected it with some peripheral actual people, such as the Herods, Gamaliel, that's Bill Gamel in the Aberdeen region, the Scottish rugby player, and the fraudster with his CEO on the court of the Bank of England, because they've got the power to be in this story for 2,000 years. The Roman procurators, etc. But Jesus and everybody involved with him were created, that is, fictional characters. In the middle of the 1st century of the present era, Rome's aristocracy felt itself confronted with a growing problem. The Jewish religion was continuing to grow in numbers, adding ever more proselytes. I don't know what that is, but I'll look it up later. Jews numbered more than 8 million and were 10% of the population of the empire, and 20% of that portion living east of Rome. That's reference number 2. Okay, east of Rome. Approximately half or more of the Jews lived outside of Palestine, of which many were descended from proselytes, male and female. However, Judaism's ethics and morality were incompatible with the hallowed Roman institution of slavery, still in the Christian Bible all the way through the Old Testament. And everyone in the churches that I go to do not question that concept or its morality. All of them just accept that this is God's message to the ordinary slaves of the world. Keep giving up your cash, keep giving up your lives, and we as the elites will keep applauding you for it. Okay, on which the aristocracy fed, lived and ruled. They feared that Judaism would become the chief religion of the empire. The Roman author Annaeus Seneca, tutor and confidant of Emperor Nero, suggested in a letter to his friend Annaeus Seneca, to his friend Lucilius, yeah, the Lucy joke, the Lucifer joke that we already shared with you in the earlier videos, a pseudonym of Lucius Piso, that lighting candles on Sabbaths be prohibited. Yeah, all of the rules they insert arbitrarily as it comes up their back. Seneca is later quoted by St. Augustine in his City of God, although the quotation does not exist in Seneca's extant writings, as charging that, in inverted commas, the Sabbath, customs of that most accursed nation, have gained such strength that they have been now received in all lands. The conquered have given laws to the conqueror. Okay? And the Sabbath joke is shared at the opening of the London Olympics with the chariots of fire fraud and all of the jokes that surround that, about running for your country on a Sunday. And Putnam and all of the Putnam secret societies and the book clubs in America that become the warmongers have been shamed by me in the last month. Yeah, and that brings down the whole of the Abel Danger movement, the Hawkins characters, the preachers at the Jehovah's who call themselves Hawkins, and the whole thing is a sad, sad indictment on human greed. The family headed by Seneca's friend Lucius Piso was confronted with an allied problem. Don't know how we get rid of that. Let's go further down. With an allied problem, more personal to it. They were the Calpurnius Pisos, who were descended from statesmen and consuls and from great poets. Yeah, all of it is bullshit, like Rabbi Burns writes, and everybody celebrates him. They do all sorts of formal proceedings to celebrate his might in proclaiming that the whole of the Scottish people are wee timorous cowering beasties like mice. Yeah, and they have no will to change their imminent future. Right then, where did we get to? They were and from great poets and historians as well. Gaius Lucius Calpurnius Piso, the leader of the family, had married Aria. Yeah, the Aryan myths. Can you see it? The Aria is a woman in the family. The younger from her grandfather's name, Aristobulus. Yeah, so aristocrats explained. This made Lucius Piso's wife the great-granddaughter of Herod the Great. That's the man that lopped the head off the fictitious John the Baptist. But he was real, like Gamaliel. And Gamaliel made his fraud company out of his garden shed, and all they sell are Ponzi schemes and coupons. Okay? It is a massive fraud against the world's people, the whole lot of them, regardless of their faith or their denomination. Repeatedly, religious-minded Judean zealots were staging insurrections against the Herodian rulers of Judea, who were Piso's wife's relations. Piso wished to strengthen his wife's family control of the Judeans. The Pisos searched, and please notice that the Judah film featuring Judah and all of the problems with the slaves and the people being sent into slavery, sent into the rowing teams for the elites boats, and that is the El Cid actor Charlton Heston when he makes the movie about Ben-Hur. Okay, and all of it is a massive stitch up. The Pisos searched for a solution to the two problems. They found it in the Jewish holy books, which were the foundation both for the rapid spread of the religion and for the zealots' refusal to be governed by Rome's puppets. The Pisos mocked but marvelled at the Jewish belief in their holy books. Therefore they felt a new Jewish book would be the ideal method to pacify the Judeans and strengthen their in-laws' control of the country. That continues with George W. Bush's little brother, or his son, I can't remember which, who is the modifier of the Talmud, and he does that in the Vatican on behalf of the current president in America. He's alleged to be a Christian who will not give them condoms in Africa because he does not believe in contraception, but what he will give them is a shallow grave everywhere, and he also gives them HIV all over that region, yeah, which is why he will not give them condoms. But he's a Jew now and a Lubavitcher follower, yeah, and none of the American activists know anything about the Lubavitcher movement, which is now global with massive numbers of people in Canada and in Australasia. About the year 60 AD, Lucius Calpurnius Piso composed Marcus. Yeah, that's my English teacher. Yeah, the man's name was Mr. Turpie, T-R-Pie, yeah, P-I-E on the end. That is the toe-sucking joke. That is the foot of the willow, the foot-sucking, and all of the Princess Fergie jokes. and all of the jokes about sitting at the foot of the willow in the Lord of the Rings film, and it's so well understood now that they dare not put that in the Lord of the Rings film. Okay, so Mr. Turpie, T is the Christian cross, R is the R. Marcus joke about the rehearsals for the launch of the Gospel of Mark in the Bible, and he was my English teacher at Kelso High School, which no longer exists. Sorry, the Gospel of Mark. So R. Marcus was the practice session for the launch of the Gospel of Mark, but it no longer exists. He was encouraged by his friend Seneca and assisted by his wife's kinsman, young Perseus the poet. That is, the Percys that are the Dukes of Northumberland, because the bloodlines just keep trickling down the power base, and the Percys of Northumberland have been claimants to the English throne, but they are weak, like King Juan Carlos's brother that was killed. Yeah, when you see later on in that video clip from El Cid, he asks him to swear that he did not kill his elder brother. He did kill his elder brother in the movie, but that movie is just fiction. Yeah, that's El Cid, 1961. Okay, so Nero's mistress, and I've had this discussion with Jim Fetzer on the war graves joke and why the poppies are worn at the cenotaph. So Nero's mistress, later his wife, Poppaea, was pro-Jewish, and Nero opposed the plan. The result was the Pisonian conspiracy to assassinate Nero, detailed in the historian Tacitus. He's the one that writes the history of the Romans in Scotland. Okay, and that is the Romans in Scotland along the fault line. Yeah, and in 79 AD they had massive quakes in a Scottish context around Force 5 on that Scottish fault line, and under the Villa Papyri in the same year, 79 AD, the Villa Papyri where the Pisos lived was buried in lava. But this attempt failed when he aborted the plot. Instead, Nero had Piso and Seneca and their fellow conspirators executed by forcing them to commit suicide. Yet he's not yet won the battle, as you will hear later on. He exiled Piso's young son Arius, spelled Arius herein with only one R, who appears in Tacitus under several names, including Antonius Natalis. So there's the launch of the Natalie name. Nero sent young Piso to Syria as governor. That post also gave him command of the legions controlling Judea. His own history records his service in Judea in the year 65 under the name of Jessius. Looks a bit like Jesus, doesn't it? And a combination of Jesus and God at the same time. Jessius Florus. I never did understand in the Zebedee cartoons that were on screen every night before the British news was read when I was only 5 and 6 years old, but Florence and Zebedee and Brian the snail are key characters in that story, and all of it is a joke, like all of the output of BBC Light and Entertainment since World War II was over. Okay, in the year 65 under the name of Jessius Florus, and in 66 with the pseudonym of Cestius Gallus. That's a chicken or a cock or a crowing cock, as we'll learn later on, and that is a massive belly laugh for them. Page 2. This Arius Calpurnius Piso deliberately provoked the Jewish revolt in 66 so he could destroy the temple in Jerusalem, for the Jews were unwilling to accept his father's story and thereby became pacified by it as was intended. Reference 7. However, his 12th legion was caught by the Zealots in the pass of Beth Horon and almost lost. Nero's reaction was to exile him instead to Pannonia. to the east of the Black Sea, in the Hungarian region, where the vampires were launched to keep you all scared and unaware of the fine details of this story, and round about the place where the Queen's Huskies, the Queen's Corgis, are a place name of one of the villages, to command a legion there and to send Licinius Maecenas. Do you get that if you're a Scotsman, by the way? Maecenas. And the name of Seneca is the tablets that we use to treat constipation, and that is the Andrew's liver salts joke. And all of that is a major cause of death when they send the troops to their deaths in squalid trenches centuries later. Okay, so he sent Licinius Maecenas to serve in Syria, and Vespasian to Judea to put down the Jewish revolt. Then in 68, Nero was assassinated by his own slave Epaphroditus. Can you see how they keep using the old gods' names? So Aphrodite, I believe, is the god of beauty and love, and that's the one that the woman with only one tit sings about, because she's a joker at the massive defrauding of the world. That is Kylie in Australia. I don't know what her real name is. So that's the Aphrodite parallel, who unknown to his master was young Piso's lackey. Galba became emperor, that's the letter G for God, and Alba, which is a lake near Rome, became emperor and named Piso's cousin Licinius Piso as his intended successor, but Galba in turn was soon overthrown by Otto. And that's the Otto the Onions joke that I've learned from the Tutsi web pages. Otto was then overthrown by Vitellius, at which point Piso and his friends began to flock together against the latter. The Pisos and Vespasian and Maecenas and Tiberius Alexander, Philo's nephew, all joined ranks behind Vespasian to seek to overthrow Vitellius. And there is a Philo's chapter in the Christian Bible, I forget the details of its name, it's quite close to Revelations, the last chapter. Arius Copernicus Piso was still commanding the 7th Legion in Pannonia. That's Austria-Hungary, reference 11. Okay? And Vespasian sent him, now appearing in Tacitus's writings, with the name Marcus Antonius Primus. And when we went to trips to Berwick, to the beach, we used to have a substance called a Primus stove, and you had to pump it as if you were screwing a woman, and all of them become smutty Freemasonic jokes. Okay, so that's the Primus stove for the family picnic. South across the Alps to overthrow Vitellius. Meanwhile, the main body of Vespasian's legions marched overland under Maecenas from the east towards Rome. Piso succeeded in defeating Vitellius's army and secured Rome for Vespasian. Maecenas arrived and promptly sent him to Judea to help Titus at the siege of Jerusalem. So these are the Roman emperors in league with the most elite writers and one of the cleverest families that the world has ever known. Okay, Maecenas arrived and promptly sent him to Judea to help Titus at the siege of Jerusalem. He did so, and in 70 AD they assaulted the city, then the temple, burning it and slaughtered many thousand, sent thousands more to slavery and gladiatorial combat and death. And when the armies were in Scotland in 79 AD, they had conscripts from all over northern Europe, Germania, Belgium, France, and the Netherlands, or Holland as it was then. Then Arius Calpurnius Piso wrote in sequence the following: Gospel of Matthew. So I need to try and get rid of those little icons. Oh, there we go. Okay, so the Gospel of Matthew was launched 70 to 75 AD or CE. Church of England, I presume that is, but I may be wrong. Okay, the present Gospel of Mark 75 to 80 Church of England, so that is 79 AD when Vesuvius erupted onto the author's home. Gospel of Luke with help of Pliny the Younger 85 to 90 AD. In the Gospel story he inserted himself by playing the role not only of Jesus but of all the Josephs as well. Okay, so every time there's a new launch of a biblical story or a section, Joseph appears in it, and Joseph is in the Egyptian myths as well. He particularly enjoyed assuming the identity of Joseph, wishing to create a Jewish hero, a saviour, in fictional form. He and his father before him felt the identity of a second Joseph secretly but very aptly fit them, for the name Piso had the same four letters rearranged as the four Hebrew letters, I don't know how to pronounce these, Yud, Vov, Samech, Fe, which in that language spelled the name Joseph. Thus they saw themselves as the new Joseph. That is why so much of the story of Joseph in Egypt is secretly redone and inserted into the gospel story of Jesus. That's Dolly Parton singing The Coat of Many Colours. Okay, so look at this and realise it's a massive joke. So the Jewish Joseph of Genesis in the Christian Bible has 12 brothers. The second Joseph has 12 disciples. That's Jesus. Yeah, the Jewish Gospel of Genesis, spices on the camels, and we've got spices with the Magi as they arrive at the manger, yeah, where the sheep are born and looked after by the shepherd. Okay, Joseph flees without his cloak in the Egyptian story from Potiphar's wife, and that becomes the potter's jokes all through. Okay, the young disciple flees without his cloak when Jesus is arrested. Okay, Joseph was sold for 20 pieces of silver in the story about Egypt, and Jesus is sold for 30 pieces of silver, and that is a minor inflationary statistic compared to the financial services crimes that the inner circle commit now. Brother Judah suggests the sale in Egypt. Judas sells Jesus for 30 pieces in the New Testament after the Last Supper and after they have turned the water to wine as a workaday miracle on behalf of the massive globalized fraud. Okay, so the background was Egypt, bondage and slaying of the firstborn Joseph on the left column. On the right column, the background was the flight to Egypt to avoid Herod's slaying of the male children. Matthew 2:13-16. Miriam, yeah, with the M and M at each end, which is now the sweeties that we used to call smarties, the M&Ms, is the sister of Moses, whose story is sequel to that of Joseph with the coat of many colours, and Mariam is Jesus' mother, so that they can pretend that in the story that both the mum and dad is being played by the author of the story. It's really, really clever. The Jesus figure which Piso creates is a composite. He inserts redrawn elements from Joseph in Egypt and other Jews of the Bible, elements from the Essenic writings. I found this in the Putnam writings. The Putnam Secret Society journals know all about the Essenic writings in the Holy Lands and the links to the Essen region, that is the place that was bombed by bomber Harris in World War II, using the RAF, which is a joke about Raphael and the Jewish angel. Okay, and that is the bombing of not Dresden, it's the Essen region, and it begins with a C, Cologne. Okay, and all of that is in pagan Germania, even way back before Jesus was born. Yeah, way back, right back into those first chapters of the Bible. And characteristics of various pagan gods. I've already explained the Aphrodite story, but I have more faith in Aphrodite than I have in any of the characters in the Christianity Fraud. Piso plagiarized the Hebrew scriptures, especially he loved and borrowed freely from prophet Isaiah, whose 44th chapter was most helpful. Piso's idea to make Jesus a god to whom to bow, worship and pray came from Isaiah 44:17, and the idea to, now this might jump to, because that's mid-sentence, it might jump to a new sentence, and the idea to prophecies in the Gospel of John, so this is a jump to another section of the story. In the Gospel of John and in the writings of the Church Fathers, the prophecies fit Jesus for the same reason, listen to this carefully, Cinderella's slippers fit her feet. Yeah, the Jesus story was deliberately written in such a way that it would fulfill the prophecies. In addition to creating Jesus in literature, Piso created for himself another famous literary role, that of a purported Jewish general and then historian, Flavius Josephus, and all of that is in really posh university libraries and cathedrals all around the world. And see the films that are made about the plague and the people like Erasmus who were immune from the plague, and they were trying to get the truth out. Okay, that's alleged, I don't know whether or not it's true. As Josephus, he contended he had bravely led his fellow Jews in the war in defending Galilee against the Roman invaders. However, like Jesus, Josephus came only in literature, that is, in Piso's own writings. Under his fictional name of Flavius Josephus, he also wrote during these approximate years the following: 1. The Jewish War, 75 to 80 AD. Jewish Antiquities, Jewish Archaeology, 90 to 93 AD. His purported autobiography entitled Vita in Latin, which would be Bios in Greek, which is also fictional, 96 to 103 AD. Do you get it? That's Vita Corleone in the Godfather movie. Yeah? Contra Apionem was written in 103 to 105 AD. Piso is known publicly in history only under his pen name of Flavius Josephus. He does not appear until Abelard Reuchlin and me come along, and those excellent Tutsi websites that have now been turned into pornography vents because the world tries to cover up this illegitimate story all the time. Okay? He does not appear as Arius Calpurnius Piso. His true identity is decipherable only by reconstruction. With his father's death at Nero's hands in 65 AD, the Pisos vanish from public Roman history. For the next 73 years, they are busy writing the New Testament and tightening their power over the known world, but they appear only under alias names. They reappear as a family, with Piso's grandson Antoninus as emperor in 138. That's the Antonine Wall, yeah, where the fault line is in Scotland, when Julius Caesar and those guys were trying to get as far north as they could. Okay, and are thereafter known chiefly as the Antonines, but not the Pisos. Do you see how the power base and the Antony jokes about Mark Antony and the Egyptian movies that are made with Elizabeth Taylor, the Zionist, in the lead role with Mark Antony, played by a Welshman. Okay? Chapter 2. The Jews reject the story. He came unto his own, and his own received him not. I'm an outcast from my own family now. None of them are thinkers, but I'm an outcast. I'm quite proud of myself, and I will continue to do what I'm doing for as long as I'm allowed to continue breathing. Okay, that's John chapter 1, 11. His mother's people rejected his tale, and with good reason. They well knew he had destroyed their temple and city and slaughtered their people because of his senseless hatred. That's John 15:25. And that he was now the author of the new fiction by which Rome was hoping to control the Judean masses. They also knew that while finishing the Gospel of Matthew and writing his account of the war entitled the Jewish War, he was the Roman general who in 73 AD destroyed the last 3 Jewish outposts, Machaerus, Herodian, and then Masada. Okay? And that is the massacre of all. There were 8 million Jews to begin with. There were 3 million left when those massacres were finished, and they were cast into slavery or they became gladiators. And the gladiator film is ever so romantic, but it is really sad that none of it is true. Right then, in the semi-fictional story of the war which he wrote, he gave himself as conqueror of Masada the fictional name of Flavius Silva. He knew the details of the siege of Masada intimately because he was the one who conducted it. He wrote that the defenders who committed suicide total 960. Yeah, and that's reference number 2, because as the explanation later of his code system will explain, 600 stood for Christ, 300 stood for the cross, and 60 stood for the name of Calpurnius Piso, the author. Yeah, and that's what I've been telling you about the statistics on the American Indian culls. There are tens of millions culled, but they round it down so that they can have a laugh at the religious fraud. And that's the Pilgrim Fathers what do that, and then the presidents, because all of them are Freemasons and all of them understand their role in defrauding the world. Then he inserted into the Gospel of Mark after the year 75 the fallen commander of Masada, Eliezer ben Yair. That's the Ben joke about the Bens that are the people that are the prime ministers of Israel ever so frequently, and the Yarrow, the Yah joke about Jehovah and the Yarrow River. Yeah, in Scotland, in the Scottish borders, he makes him Yah-Iris, and you've still got the Aryan derivation, quite obvious to any sensible person, but not at all obvious to any of the really intelligent, intellectual Jehovah's Witnesses who soak up everything that they are told from New York in their little pamphlet every week. In Mark 5:22, then he puts him into Luke 8:41 as Lazarus. He's the leper in the El Cid movie, and it's really touching that El Cid, because he's a freedom fighter and a justice seeker, is recognized even by the blind. Yeah, because of the way he speaks and the way he takes on real issues in his every conversation. He was teasing that he, Piso, because his alter ego creation was Jesus, could heal and raise from the dead, whereas the Jews had been forced by him to perish at Masada. One blind man raised from the dead. Yeah, in Luke, the whole of that is a fraud, like the whole of the Old Testament. Because of the destruction in the war, Judea after 70 was desolate and underpopulated, with little left to tax, a bit like the UK in this day and age, and the whole world in fact in this day and age, because of the massive scams of the money lenders that Jesus, in inverted commas, warned us about. With little left to tax, the Herodian aristocracy had gone to Rome permanently to live. The Sadducean priesthood, appointees and in-laws of the Herods were dead at the revolutionaries' hands, and the remainder scattered to Rome. Even the Essenic visionaries in the desert were dead at Piso's hand. Do you get the Germanian link there? And the Bomber-Harris links? And the Harris joke is the joke that eventually becomes Rolf Harris and the chair of the war crimes inquests at Nuremberg. Whitney Harris. Yeah, and that becomes the Prime Minister's constituency and the dead pop singer Whitney Houston. The only surviving Judean leadership were the non-political or fence-straddling Pharisees, the baddies in some of the stories, who after 70 changed their names to rabbis. Do you get the link to the rabbits, by the way? Do you get the link to the rabbits? Hitler's friends, the fascist groupings all over the world, and the laundering of the Nazi groupings to innocent countries that then become fascists and then are suppressed. All of the ordinary people get killed in the name of the anti-communist thing that even Abelard Reuchlin wrongly interprets. Okay, the remaining Judeans looked to them for guidance. Their leader, Yochanan ben Zakkai, and now we're getting into those fictional movies about the masters of the universe with the Scotsman in the lead role and Indiana Jones in the film. I forget what they were called, but about Obi-Wan Kenobi and all of that stuff. Do you remember it? Everything that Hollywood laugh at, or the monarchies and the elites laugh at, if it wins an Oscar, it's right up the food chain for the genocidal jokers. So Yochanan ben Zakkai had obtained Vespasian's permission to establish a school at Yavne. Again, the one true God. Nothing to do with Jesus Christ. But in the Jehovah's stories every week, Jesus Christ is intertwined, despite what we're told in the Deuteronomy chapter, never to worship false icons or anyone but the one true God who created our universe. All of them break the rules every Sabbath. In return, the rabbis now taught pacifism and accommodation. That's pacifism. There are only 3 million Jews left in the world. And accommodation to Vespasian's imperial urges. No, it says wishes there. But unlike the Herods before them, they were not fully practical, for they refused to accommodate Piso's wishes as to religion. They refused to instruct their people to accept his story. Okay? Herods in the same team, by the way. Do you get the picture? All of them are in the same team, at the top of the power base. But when they have fallouts, they execute people, and they become subordinated again to the emperor, and then when they execute the emperor, they become the emperor's next in line. Same in the monarchies all over Europe for all of world history. And that's why El Cid was struggling to get the king, who in that movie looks dead like, that's the king that killed his brother to become the king. He's dead like Tony Blair, and I now understand how God works to give us messages like that. Right then, next page, we're on to page 4. The little man up in the sycamore tree. Now this is a joke that even occurs on the golf course, with German golfers in the trees. in the US Open, I remember it distinctly, the little man up in the sycamore tree in Luke chapter 19, who becomes a follower of Jesus, is Rabbi Gamaliel. That's Bill Gamel, or the even more powerful Gamaliel, or Gamel, that is on the Rothschild interlocks, which is why Bill Gamel is relatively minor, and he runs his business from the garden shed rather than from the European Central Bank or the massive Bank of International Settlements in Basel. Rabbi Gamaliel is inserted not only as the teacher of Paul, that's Paul the tax collector, but also as Speaker of the Council of Jerusalem, warning that the apostles should be let alone. Acts 5, 38 to 39. Even Rabbi Akiva would be added to Acts as Agabus, Acts 11, 28 and 21:10, and as Sceva, Acts 19:14. More vengeance was wrought by Piso by his picturing the Jews in the successive Gospels as increasingly evil. Okay, so originally they were Jews, they were friends of Jews, and suddenly they are now in a position to put all of their old friends down, and they will do it with relish, like any world leader would, to stay the world leader, to kill their wives, to kill their younger brother. They will do it with relish. In Matthew chapter 23, Jesus repeatedly calls the scribes and Pharisees hypocrites and even vipers. It's easy to throw the blame at others in all of these stories, but does not include the people. In Matthew 3:7, also the Pharisees and the Sadducees are called offspring of vipers, this time by John the Baptist, who got his head on a plate, because he's the outspoken one, a bit like me, but I think he's made up, and the head on the plate becomes fine art in the Louvre, several versions of it by very elite artists, all of them are piss artists that piss on the world for all of its history. Right then, so John the Baptist, by the time of Luke 3:7, it's not merely the leaders but the crowds whom John the Baptist calls the offspring of vipers. And in Acts 23:12, written 96 to 100 AD, it is the Jews and not merely the Pharisees or Sadducees who form a conspiracy to kill Paul. By the time of the Gospel of John, year 105, the author, Piso's son Justus, he's a spirited guy, because eventually he writes up his dad as the devil, has Jesus tell the Jews who challenge him, "You are of your father, the devil." Okay? That's the young guy at the bottom of the food chain in the early days, but when his dad's getting a little bit near to croaking, he actually portrays him as Satan. Even when Piso absolves the villains of culpability, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do," Luke 23:34. And when you combine a sentence like that is really emotive and compassionate with a biblical reference, you're beginning to talk like the most insightful professor on the world would, and it's very impressive for a lay listener, someone sitting in the pew. Let me read it again. "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." Luke 23:34. Can you see the weight of that? It's giving people a conscience who have no right to that conscience. It is the Roman soldiers and not the Jews whom he excuses. It was true that none of the actors knew what, because none of the fictional characters could be present to observe the writing of the story. It's really clever. It's easy to make your prophecies come true if these are the terms of reference. The New Testament pictures the Jews as the enemies of Jesus, of Paul, and of the message of the gospel. Piso's son, Proculus, I think that's what Billy Connolly got stuck up his arse. Yeah, because he deserted the working slaves in Scotland and worked in favour of the elites in Scotland. Yeah, and then he gets the cancer up the willy. Writing the epistle to the Romans in 1128 explained the reason why the Jews were being pictured as the enemies of the new believers. As concerning the gospel, they, the Jews, are enemies because of you. That's the words of a song somewhere. Because of you, I never stray too far from the sidewalk. Yeah, it's about marital infidelity, and it is a lovely, lovely song. But the marital infidelity and all of the oaths that you swear on the Christian Bible are futile, because there never was a Christ, and it ties you into very expensive moral decision making. Yeah, all of the biological rules that the real gods gave us are completely ignored now for profit. It costs a fortune to get christened, costs a fortune to get married, costs a fortune to get buried. Yeah, and if you go through several rounds of divorce and remarriage, it costs a massive fortune. Yeah, which is why you can buy a prenup and get for a relatively small fortune. All of it is a massive series of globalized frauds. That is in order that the people would believe the story. The author of 1 and 2 John admits why the Jews were then opposing the gospel. They were refusing to confess that Jesus Christ had come in brackets, the flesh. Yeah, in the flesh. The author's response was to label such opponents as deceivers and antichrists. Yeah, we've talked about that in the earlier video. Okay, the main author, so chapter 3 now, the authorship of the New Testament books. Let God be true, but every man a liar. Yeah, that's the Coldplay lyrics. When I ruled the world, and never an honest man. All of it comes through that they understand, Coldplay, that the whole thing is a fraud. Okay, Romans 3:4. The main authors of the New Testament books were Arius, Calpurnius, Piso, Josephus in brackets, his son Fabius Justus, his granddaughter's husband Pliny the Younger, and his son Julius. Okay, and that guy that made the dad was Justus. That's right at the end of the writing regime. Okay, but the writings then follow on, and the other family members and their followers launch all of the false messianic religions, including the Moorish religion that's in the El Cid movie, including Islam, and including all of the religions in the Indian continent, ever so ancient but ever so modern compared to the Jesus fraud. Okay, so following is a list of actual authorship of each of the books of the New Testament. Let's get that fully on screen. So you remember, you can read this for yourself. If you just open up the PDF, you can print it out and you can read it in bed, and it will be a massive revelation for you. Okay, so name of the book: the original Mark, written 60 AD by Lucius Calpurnius Piso. Yeah. The next chapter is Matthew, 70 to 75 by Arius Calpurnius Piso. He's the one known as the man. The present Mark, okay, 75 to 80. So that's when their home was destroyed under Vesuvius in 79 AD, and that's when the earthquake started in the Perth region in Scotland, right across the Trossachs into the west coast at Oban. Arius Calpurnius Piso wrote that as well. The chapters on Luke, by Luke, 85 to 90 AD, Arius Calpurnius Piso with Pliny's help. John's chapters 105 AD, Justus, Calpurnius Piso. Yeah, that's the one that dobbed on the dad. Acts of the Apostles, 96 to 100, chapters 1 to 15, AC Piso with Justus's help. Yeah, that's Arius, Calpurnius Piso again. They're still talking, yet despite the fallout on the devilish issues. Chapters 16 to 17 by Justus, chapters 18 to 28, some written by Justus, some by Pliny. Romans, 100 AD, Proculus, Calpurnius Piso. Corinthians 1, Galatians and Ephesians, 100 to 103 AD, Pliny. 2 Corinthians, Ephesians, 103 to 105, Justus. Colossians, 106, 107, Justus with his son Julianus' help. Timothy, 105 AD, Pliny the author. Timothy 2, 107, Justus, the young child, or the youngster in the team, a little bit irreverent towards the family. And let's keep going, because there's a lot to tell. We're moving now on to page 5 of the PDF, so we're a fifth of the way through. So Titus, 103 to 105, written by Pliny. Philemon, 105 to 110, Justus with the help of Julianus. Goodness knows what gender that is. James, 110, Justus. 1 and 2, Peter, 110 to 115 AD, Proculus. 1, 2 and 3, John, 110 to 115, Julius, Calpurnius, Piso. Jude, 110 to 115, that's the Beatles' Hey Jude song, by the way, and the Beatles come into it all the way through like the Rolling Stones do, because the Rolling Stone is the Easter egg and the stone that was in front of Jesus' tomb. Revelation 163 to 137, that's the last chapter and also the title of my website. Julius, okay, 136 to 137. Then we get Hebrews in 140, written by Flavius Arianus, Arian, aka Appian, younger grandson of Piso, by Claudia Phoebe. And Phoebe is part of the cast in the Rabsy Nisbet jokes. All of it is understood by the low-life people all across Britain, and all across the elite sector, all across the world. That's the inner circle. Okay, so let's keep going. The Church Fathers now. Between 100 and 105 AD, additional Christian books were already being done by the same authors who were finishing the New Testament itself. Julius wrote an epistle as Clement of Rome. Pliny wrote a number of epistles as Saint fucking Ignatius. That's the head of the Jesuits. That was a fictitious character, and that's the Jesuits that launched Pope Francis into the current papal role. He is a genocidal leader in Latin America, and he gives confession to the killers. All of that can be found on my website. Proculus wrote one as Saint Polycarp. The fish jokes for them are really vicious, because the fish is the penis. By these writings, the authors were installing themselves in their own time as the legitimate successors of the apostles, Peter and Paul. That's Peter, who denied Jesus' existence 3 times when the Fox News cock crowed, and Paul, the man who managed to convince everyone that Jesus, who never lived, was more powerful than the gods that created the massive universe. And he took all of that story into the Mediterranean region and into L'Aquila, where they get more quakes than anywhere else in Italy. Who had supposedly written in the middle of the past century. This facade entitled them, as they now went among their new believers, to be the legitimate propagandizers and interpreters of the Christian writers. Okay, now we're getting into fancy words that I don't understand, but some of you, particularly if you're in the clergy, may be able to explain to me on the weekend the Septuagint. Okay, that's gin with the letter T on the end, and 7 is 7, sept, UA, I cannot suss that. Okay, Father 2 was busy. Piso was amending the Greek Septuagint. In his Gospels, he had strengthened his story by misquoting places from the Hebrew Scriptures. He changed language in the Septuagint to make it conform with the NT, New Testament misquotes. That way there would be an alleged correct translation of the Hebrew Scriptures by which the New Testament quotations agreed. The Apocrypha. Piso wished to create a strong foundation on which to place the new faith. So between 100 and 115 AD, he recreated the story of the 400 lost years of Jewish history. He did this by also writing most of the 14 books of the Apocrypha, including Esdras, 1 Maccabees, Judith. The Judith stories launched the Punch and Judy stories, and that's about beheading people in foreign armies by getting them drunk. Tobit, do you see it? That's the joke about the hobbits and the Christ's College Cambridge stories that I've told in previous videos. Tobit, the Toby Jug launch. Bel and the Dragon. Okay, the dragon is usually the penis, yeah, and that is the penis and the snake that is wrapped round the doctor's oath, the Hippocratic oath. Okay, by making Jewish history brave and glorious, the empire's peoples would more readily accept it as their own history and become the new Israel, which now rules America. The writings of Arian. Yeah, do you see the links to the Aaron jersey? That lost me my friends from the SNP when I shared the joke with them. And this is all about ancient history, and all of them relentlessly try and cover it up. They do not look for positive policies in the future. They're just ashamed of what they've done to the world, and there is no need for that to continue beyond the next fortnight. Later, between 130 and 150, Arianus, a longer form of his grandfather's name, Arius, would emulate him. He would use Piso's pseudonyms of Flavius and Barnabas, one of the others that was crucified, I think, and he would compose, in addition to Hebrews, many Christian books. The Shepherd of Hermas, Barnabas, and Didache, Die is the Dionysius joke, and that is the joke that gets Lady Diana named, and it becomes the Ken Dodd and the Diddy Men joke. Okay, and the Ken story is part of the Nesset joke, Martyrdom of Polycarp, Epistle to Dionysius, as well as 24 volumes on Roman history. I will not be reading those to you, do not worry. An account of Alexander's campaign into India, the writings of the purported astronomer Ptolemy, yet the space menace is very much a part of the religious and world ownership frauds even today. That's nuclear physics, understanding the universe, and everybody who gets motor neuron disease because they think they're smarter than God or all of the gods put together. And the lecture notes of Epictetus, his Stoic instructor, whom he created, all of them are made up. Many of